and welcome to 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking three powerful questions. I'm your host, Rachel Vogel, and joining me on tonight's episode is Jeff Bowers, the founder of Wax Management. With over 20 years of experience breaking down barriers to forge new paths for music artists, Jeff got his start on the major label circuit working in A&R and catalog management for Warner Bros., Atlantic Records, and Rhino Records. There, he managed creative, marketing, and product and licensing strategy for seminal catalogs such as Nirvana, Sonic Youth, John Coltrane, and Miles Davis, and at the time, new alternative artists like Paramore and Portugal the Man. After a brief stint managing licensing strategy for crowdfunding platform Pledge Music, he began his career in artist management, founding Wax Management in 2015. In collaboration with Wax Management CEO and fellow manager Janice Shen, Bowers has struck unprecedented equitable deal structures that foster long-term success for artists. He represents cross-genre artists while specializing in the SoundCloud community. So, Jeff, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to get started. But first, how's it going? How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Doing pretty well. Are you ready for your first question?
Sure, let's get to it.
Imagine for a second you are sitting down with your 25-year-old self. What one piece of advice would you give him on a personal note, and what one piece of advice would you give him from a business perspective?
They might be the same. So can I give a little backstory here?
Of course.
So when I was 25, I'd started my first record label when I was about mid-teenage years, which sounds crazy, but it was like mid to late 80s. I was in a punk band and we wanted to put out a record. So I taught myself how to make a record and we went and recorded and found a pressing plan and did all these things. And it's obviously before the proliferation of the internet and home computers and streaming. So everything is still physical. So we started a label just to put out our own record and then ended up putting out lots of our friends' records. And then that kind of branched into more distribution for things. And back then, all the labels would just advertise in fanzines and swap records at shows with touring bands. And that's how we kind of distributed internationally. And then when you got enough releases under your belt, maybe one of the indie distributors would pick you up. So when I was 25, that happened. I was with an indie distributor, and a lot of them were kind of one stops, right? So everything's physical. They would then distribute your product to lots of other little mom and pop. I mean, we call them mom and pops, just other kids, whatever, little distribution companies, record stores buy direct. Everyone's buying direct, right? And everybody's on terms. And then if one company, one startup, one stop in that chain crashed and burned, then nobody got. So I had a whole bunch of releases with the distributor, and a bunch of people didn't pay them. They couldn't pay us. Nobody, and everything just fell apart. So my label crashed and burned because they owed us probably some nominal fee, a few $1,000s, but it was everything that we had to put records out. So at that point, I'm like, wait, well, what should I do? Should I go to grad school? So I guess the first thing is like, one, don't give up, right? Because if music finds you or creative endeavors, and by creative endeavors, I mean, that could be all kinds of things, right? That could be whatever you do that hopefully you can also feed yourself and your family on, right? That is meaningful to you, that you have to make creative choices around, right? That's my definition. Like, it doesn't have to be art, music, literature. I mean, you could be a creative baker, but just something where you're making creative choices, not just transactional decisions, right? So I guess what I would say to myself is don't give up, and the market always comes back. The market, in some variation, the market came back.
Every industry has its dirty little secrets, and we all know that's no different in the music industry. Sometimes people think that's a bad thing, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they can be quite good. So, what's one secret you would like to share with our listeners about the industry?
Take the suits money. Well, just seriously, because now I'm going to contradict myself coming from, punk rock puritanism. But like the reality is, like, when I started getting into kind of the SoundCloud rap and the internet rap and all these different kind of experimental music, I really like experimental music. I've always been a big rap fan. But the way everyone was doing it was very DIY, meaning they were just working with whatever was in front of them. So I think the dirty secret is, and this is where I'm going to contradict myself, is you can get almost any deal that you want from a major if they want to sign you. And you can get paid enough to finance your music for years to come, because I think that should be everyone's goal is, I mean, the reason that people aren't happy in this world, at least over here in Western society, usually is because they are not making enough money to live or they hate what they have to do for a living. So I think the primary goal is make enough money to live so you don't have to stop being an artist. The indies are not offering those deals and the majors are. Like when I get offers from indies, and this isn't all indies, but some of the big ones, it's usually an old fashioned deal that's mostly 360 and they take ownership of the music. When I get offers from majors, and most of the deals that we've done with majors are licensing deals, pub admin deals, where the artist maintains control of everything. They still own all their music. And what's possible even with our small roster is that we've brought $30 million in deals to artists in 3 years. And we've had lots of gold and platinum songs, and we've had lots of songs in the hundreds of millions of streams, but we've never been on the radio. We don't have a Billboard hit. So that's what's possible in music right now. And I think that's the secret. It's like there's a very strong middle class in music, and artists should be taking part in that and trying to adjust their business accordingly, like they would for their future, like they were funding a business. You got to surround yourself with people who are good at business, or you got to figure the business out, or you're going to crash and burn. It's just kind of a reality.
I think that's a really great shout, especially the way that the industry has been shifting lately. All right, last question. Throughout your career, I'm sure you've been asked plenty of questions, whether for industry conferences, the media, or even a promotion. But throughout all of those interviews and all of those questions, there has to be one that you've never been asked but would have liked to. So, what is that question and what would be your answer?
Do people get stumped here usually?
Always, yeah.
I'm sure everybody else is way more, many other people, but more articulate than I. I guess maybe just like, what does music mean, right? Like, what does music mean to you? And I think that's an important question. Like, what does it mean to you intellectually, culturally, emotionally, and spiritually, if you have that bent? And so I guess the way I would answer that question is that I think, like I said, is like my own personal experience, and I think the experience of most people, millions of people, is they don't have a sense of what's possible in this world until they see a positive example for it, right? I mean, I didn't understand that. Like I didn't, like I didn't understand. Like, and I remember distinctly that day, like I told you the story about this first punk album I bought, right? And I remember listening to that music and thinking to myself, well, I don't know what these guys look like. I don't have a source to, I can't Google search them. I wasn't thinking Google search. I'm saying this now in retrospect, but like I don't know what these guys look like. I don't know what they do. I don't know where they live. Like, do they come from Planet Rockstar? Like, but apparently you can do anything you want. You can go out and like create something. You can make something. And I think it's really important. Like, even my artists, they go, oh, I get these emails and these text messages and Instagram messages from kids, and they go, oh, you're my favorite band. You saved my life. And they're like, I don't know what the hell to say to a kid when he says you saved my life. And I'm like, but it's probably true. Like that person didn't know what could be possible in this world because, we spend a lot of time, most people live in a practical world. They spend a lot of time going, well, how does this relate to my survival? And how, can I buy food? Can I get health insurance? Can I pay my rent? I mean, we see like inflation is a huge factor in things. So a lot of people, it's like, well, they feel almost guilty having dreams. But if you see some people who are just like you in lots of ways, maybe come from the same background as you do, maybe come from the same economic background as you do, anything where there's like a variance where, where maybe you didn't think that you were entitled to anything. Maybe you weren't even entitled to have dreams. I think that music and creative work like helps people be allowed to dream. Like I think you can listen to a song and go, well, shit, maybe it's okay for me to make music. Maybe it's okay for me to do things. Maybe it's okay for me to aspire to transcend my current situation or even just myself.
Well, it's about time we close out tonight's episode, but Jeff, thanks again for joining me. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. To everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Stay tuned for next week of 3Q, where I interview industry professionals for just 15 minutes by asking 3 powerful questions. See you next time.